historic colors used in the interior of the building, and that
Good morning and welcome. The 27th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure is hereby reconvened. This, of course, is the second public hearing of the Joint Select Committee in the pursuant, of course, to an inquiry into the establishment of systems for the maintenance of drainage and roadways. I'd like to remind members and our guests to keep their cell phones off or on silent and or vibrate. This hearing is being broadcast live on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Good morning again to members of the viewing and listening audience, and please know that you can send your comments via email at parl101@ttparliament.org or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ttparliament or on Twitter at ttparliament. I would now like to welcome the representatives of the Ministry of Works and Transport and, of course, invite you to introduce yourselves.
Good morning, Chairman, Vice Chair members. I'm Sonia Francis Yearwood, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Works and Transport.
Good morning. I'm Dahanmati Ramdat, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary.
Morning. I am Paraswam Ramlugan, Chief Technical Officer.
Morning. I am Navin Ramsingh, Acting Director of Highways.
Good morning, all. Paula Weber, Acting Director of Drainage.
Good morning. I'm Hayden Phillip, Program Director, PURE.
Good morning. I'm Candice Scribner, Manager of the Coastal Protection Unit.
Good morning. I'm Marvin Gonzalez. I'm the Director of Legal Services Unit.
And the officials at the back.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Rabindranath Jogi, Director of Mechanical Services.
Good morning. Adandi Pigot, Traffic Engineer.
Good morning. I'm Kerry Shepard, Chief Engineer, Maintenance and Construction, Drainage Division.
Good morning. Latif Mohammed, Director of Construction.
Okay, again, welcome. Just to benefit of our viewers, I would like to remind all that the objectives of this inquiry is to examine the current system in place for the maintenance of drainage and roadways, to examine the programs and initiatives geared towards the maintenance of drainage and roadways in order to determine whether they are adequate and effective, and to determine the challenges associated with the maintenance of drainage and roadways. I would now like to invite Mrs. Sonia Francis Yearwood to make some opening remarks.
Good morning again, Chair, Vice Chair members. Thank you once again for inviting us to this meeting this morning. The first request submitted by the committee, we sought to provide as comprehensive as possible a response in writing, and it allowed us to take a close examination of some of the activities that we undertake. our first meeting, our last meeting that we had. Once again, it's brought to the fore certain areas, and we want to thank the committee members for the guidance provided at that meeting. Today, once again, we hope that we will be able to respond comprehensively as possible, and where further information is required, we stand ready to provide it. Thank you, Chair.
I will now take this opportunity to introduce the members of the committee. On my extreme right.
Good morning, all. I'm Glenda Jennings-Smith, a member.
Good morning, all. Nigel De Freitas, member.
Good morning, Rushton Parry, Vice Chairman.
And, of course, I'm Stephen Crease, the chairman of this committee. I will now invite members to present questions to the officials from the ministry.
Okay, thank you. Good morning again, everyone. I want to run up from where we left off the last day that we met. And obviously, I had some more time to look at the information that you provided. I also had the ability to gauge comments from the public in terms of what was some of the responses that was given during that last session. And in having conversations with members of the public, I got this sense that they understand the challenges that you, as a ministry, is facing in terms of manpower, equipment, the challenges with having 25% of your equipment operational, budget constraints as well. The take that I got out of the conversation was that there are three things that are missing in terms of satisfying the public demand. The first issue that the ministry must address, and perhaps you may address it in your response, is are we delivering on the expectation of the general public? In terms of, you all have provided several tools that the public can use to make reports on issues concerning the roadways and so on. Those issues are what impacts the public the most. I mean, yes, they want new roads. Yes, they want roads paved. But the basic things like potholes, grass that is growing 8 and 9 feet high, the public gauges the performance of your ministry by those simple things. And I got the feeling that when the public makes requests through, whether it's through the office, through the tools that you provide, through 623 MEND, a number of things does not happen. One, the minister in 2016, via a release that I have here, gave a commitment that, and if I could just quote from the document here, Works Minister launches Issues Repair Hotline. A response time of 1 week was given by the minister, but the ministry says ultimately the goal of the Highways Division is to mend potholes within 48 hours after receiving the reports. Well, the feedback that I have gotten is that that doesn't happen, either at the 1 week interval or the 48 hours interval. So clearly, the public feels that they are not getting the service that you have made a commitment to provide. So that's the first piece. The second piece is, based on the non-delivery, based on your commitment, the public says that we don't get feedback. So you're asking me to file these requests using WISE during 623 MEND, and the vast majority do not get an acknowledgement or some feedback when the time has passed. And lastly, for a lot of people, the issue of roads goes beyond just the fact that there are potholes, but it hits them in their pockets in terms of the cost of maintaining their vehicles, the economic impact to some communities. And if I may be allowed to put a pin in for my arrow, we are on show this weekend, being Easter weekend. And people refuse to come to Mayaro because of the condition of the road from south to Mayaro. That's one. And right now, between Mayaro Junction and Indian Bay, we have about 8 or 9 massive potholes that, and I must tell you, I've reached out to our local office and they've assured me that they'll get some work done before the week is over. But it tells a story to the visitors coming to Miaro in terms of their comfort, their enjoyment. Traffic flow will be impeded, you know, when you have to slow down on these things. So in these 3 areas, I want to have a sense at the end of this sitting here today that the ministry tells this committee that this is what we are going to do to address those 3 areas, because we can't get more money than we are given. I understand that we can't buy equipment overnight, but we can do better in terms of communicating with the public to raise that consciousness that, yes, we are listening and we are acting in the best way that we can. And I think that is where the public feels cheated at the end of the day. So perhaps, again, like I did the last time, I am hoping that my colleagues can drive the conversation for the next hour, hour and a half based on that opening and get somewhere that we'd want to head, you know, going forward this year based on that. So thank you again.
Thank you, Vice Chair. If I understand your statement correctly, and I believe I do, because one of the things that we clearly understand at the ministry and we are seeking to deal with, it's often not a question of what we have done or even what we have not done, but it is what the public knows, what they understand. So there is an issue of perception. And this is one of the good things about these types of committees. It does bring out the information to the general public. In the issue of feedback, we have, through our corporate communications unit, sought to undertake different programs of public awareness. Even there, of course, we do have an issue of a resource challenge, because in order to do what you're saying that we should be doing, we need to have the resources to properly man social media, the press, and to ensure that we meet some of our metrics that we have actually set for ourselves. I will let the Director of Highways go a little bit into our 623 Men program, because exactly what you've been saying there in terms of seeking to ensure that we have someone manning the phone lines, responding to written requests. We have been doing that. And maybe what we have not been doing is publicizing the quantum of work that we actually getting done on a daily basis. At the ministry, we have a clear understanding of the economic impact of what we do. And in terms of how we translate what we do into the economic viability of an area, for instance, as you mentioned, your own area, we do take that into account when we are trying to properly assign resources. Before you came, interestingly, while we were here, there was a statement made, and I made a statement of fishes and loaves. I'm not sure, as we come into the Easter season, if we may recall that. Sometimes we do feel as if it's fishes and loaves, but we are taking steps to ensure that those fishes and loaves reach the majority of the population as best as we can. And we're continuing to put mechanisms in place to monitor, because I think a key aspect of all that we do is, one, we have to ensure, no matter what the economic situation is, that we provide value for money in our activities. And then we must monitor what we do to see whether or not we are reaching the target audience. And you gave us some good keys at our last sitting in terms of when we are putting our mechanisms in place, in terms of our key indicators, which we have started to take on board in a concentrated way. So that's just my opening salvo to indicate that the public perception we are very aware of, and we are seeking to address that. And I'll let the Director of Highways go a little bit into how our 623 Men program is going at this time.
Just before Mr. Ramsing addresses that, I just want to tell you as a member of the public what I want when I call 623 Men.
Yes.
And perhaps Mr. Ramsing will tell me if that is how it works. If when I finish this JSC today, I call 623 Men and I give them the exact location of the 8 potholes that I spoke about earlier, and I give the exact lamppost numbers, I want at that point in time, that agent who is taking that call, tell me, sir, you will get a response to this request within 48 hours. Not a resolution, but a response. Because it may have 5,000 other jobs coming in at the same time. So within that 48 hours, somebody called me and says, sir, we have taken notice, we've passed this on to your district office. Within 7 days, that's the service level, we expect to have this repaired. But somebody on your end must be flagged to call back Rio Claro and say, look, did this request, was it attended? If not, because things happen, it is the duty of 623 Men to call me and say, Mr. Parry, we expected this to happen today. Unfortunately, because of A, B, C, D, we will have to look for another 4 days or 8 days or 10 days. Now, bad news is better than no news. I learned that in the service business. So if somebody comes and tells me, well, Parry, what you want, you ain't getting today, but listen, I will sort you out within a week time. I am satisfied that somebody came back to me and my perception of your professionalism, although I didn't get what I want, your professionalism is registered at the back of my mind. And I think we have the public needing that sort of assurance that you know, you guys know what you're doing. So perhaps Mr. Ramsing can tell me if that is how it works.
Presently, I don't believe we have any feedback like that. At the first committee meeting, I did indicate to you that one of the problems with the MEN program is people call from, when there's a pothole, people is not familiar with the fact that whether it falls under Ministry of Works or it falls under local government. And I gave the commitment that when somebody calls and it falls under local government, I will establish a contact with the local government and redirect those complaints, rather than just inform them that that don't fall under our purview. The recommendations you make about the feedback, I will definitely introduce that. I don't think we have it now, right? What I could tell you based on the fact sheet is that we received about 1,075 complaints, of which we resolved about 717 complaints, right? So we do respond to the complaints when they are received and once it's within our road. From now on, I guess within the next 2 weeks, I will ensure that a feedback mechanism is in place so that we inform the people when the road is programmed for patching, right? And if it's not patched, encourage them to call back and inform us. Now, another thing you did mention last time is that WASA has an app. So we at the Ministry of Works will have to start using the technology, because there are apps that will tell you right away, we could say, when it's resolved. So we have to look towards technology to try to assist us in this whole scenario of receiving complaints and giving feedback to people, right? I've spoken to WASA about the app. I have made a commitment that I will see how the app operates, and I will see, since it's a government agency, if maybe we could share the same app, because the app, basically, they report on a hole caused by WASA. In our case, it will be a hole formed by the Ministry of Works due to the natural deterioration of the roads.
Just before I pass on to one of my colleagues, as a suggestion, the fact that you already receive calls from the members of the public on all holes, whether it's secondary, you know, primary roads, tertiary roads. Perhaps the suggestion going forward is that some agency that perhaps may not be attached to the Ministry of Works, but as a general complaints desk for infrastructure. And that now becomes the duty of that agency to liaise with either Works, WASA, be it the regional corporation. And the same process follows because, again, as an example, because I ran help desk in the energy sector for years, and my help desk used to receive calls about air conditioning, ceiling falling down. But people reach out because they're looking for help. So what we would have done, we would have formed what you call operational level agreements with the facilities help desk, with any other help desk. And long as we get the call, we pass it on. But what we didn't do was drop it. We passed it on, and we kept it as a bit of our responsibility to follow up on behalf of the customer. So we did call facility and say, look, this request 7 days old on our system for an air conditioning in room 101. Were you able to resolve it? And we would give back the person making the request a bit of feedback. Again, I think feedback really is what's going to build the customer perception of your performance. And I tell you, as members of the public, we'll be very forgiving when we have information. But when we don't get it, I think the anger raises, and you may end up getting licks for things that you may not have control over. So perhaps that is something that you could look at in your discussion going forward, of how, taking ownership of the request till the end, and then you pass it off. So that's just a suggestion, and I'll pass over to one of my colleagues now.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Going on to another topic, your submission mentioned a comprehensive desilting program of water courses for the fiscal year 2017-2018. This is a program for the clearing and desilting of over 200 water courses in Trinidad and Tobago. To date, how many water courses have been cleared and desilted under this program, and when does this program end?
So remember, there's a process that we have to follow. So the first thing that we did is we identified the water courses that required desilting as a matter of urgency, which we've done. Second thing we needed to do was to get Cabinet's approval, which we now have. The third thing that we need to do is to get confirmation of funds, which we are in the process of doing. The programming of the desilting, of course, also is an issue in that you would want to do it in a timeline as close as possible to where you envisage your major rainfall. So you wouldn't want to do it too early in the dry season, and then by the time we reach mid-rainy season, it is no longer there. So in other words, we are now at the point where we have our approvals. We've gone for the confirmation of funding. We actually have to source funding within our existing allocation. So we are programming the desilting process to start. We are in March. We are programming the desilting program physically to start April, May.
And given that some of these water courses are problematic in the sense that they are prone in heavy rainfall in the rainy season to burst their banks and cause flooding, do you all in any way prioritize those water courses? And even in terms of the desilting program, is it the same program that applies to all of these water courses, or the ones that you know annually cause a problem in the rainy season, you have a vamped up maintenance program for those ones? Is something like that exist?
Yes, member. If you'd like some further details, I can let our Director of Drainage go into it a little bit for you, if you'd like.
Yes, we do have a program where we do desilting works annually once the availability of funds is in place. So you're quite right, we prioritize these projects across the country. We have 4 major districts where we have operations that take place. So we prioritize them according to the areas, 4 areas that we have.
If that is in place, how come we still have that problem of flooding? And every time it floods, you're hearing that the causeways need to be cleaned or or something needs to happen with the causeways, the water causeways, in order to prevent the flooding. So what I'm asking specifically is if there's a program in place, we know and prioritize those particular causeways that are causing a problem annually, why is it that we still have this flooding problem?
Well,
notwithstanding the amount of rainfall, I understand that.
Right. We still have the problems because some of our systems are over 50 years old. And in addition, funding is always a challenge in some cases. But once we have the funding in place, the program kicks off. We also do in-house the silting program where the river control workers, they use hand tools, and in those areas where equipment is not able to, we're not able to access, the workers do go in and do some works in those areas that need attention.
So is it a timing issue in the sense that the amount of time it would take to sort of deal with those causeways that are prone to flooding is too long before the rainy season starts? Because I'm hearing that there is a program. I'm hearing that you do have initiatives to go in and clean these rivers and these water causeways, but every year it floods. So something is not working somewhere. And I'm just trying to get to the root cause of the problem. If it's a timing issue, the amount of time it would take to clean those rivers, you already indicated funding might also be an issue, and that's understandable. But when you do have the funding, it seems that certain years you do, we still have the problem of flooding.
Well, that's why, as my PS indicated, this program, it's a program with much more water courses that we have included, and we have sent for confirmation of funds. So once those funds have been made available, we would be able to do much more work than we would have done in the past.
So can we give the public, maybe not an assurance, but hope that this year we won't see as much flooding as previous years?
To a point, yes, but we also realize within the last year or so, the rainfall patterns have increased. Rainfall intensity in some areas have increased. So, of course, some of our channels become not able to carry the amount of rainfall in some of the areas.
Good morning. I want to ask, I'm going back to road. I want to ask how often projects are monitored by the Ministry of Works and Transport to ensure that the contractual obligations are being fulfilled. And I want to refer particularly to that stretch of road within my own constituency between San Souci and Montevideo. And I look here at a proposal which was done in 2016, because I know for the past 2 years, I have been in communication making requests about that particular piece of road. Something was done, and apparently it was not completed. And to this day, it has remained the same way, and that is 2 years ago. Even the part that was done, it has returned to its original condition. And hence the reason for my question, how often are projects monitored to ensure that contractual obligations are fulfilled?
Member, let me answer in twofold. I think you've asked a broad question and then you've narrowed it down to a specific project. In terms of the monitoring of the contracts based on the division under whom the roadway contract would fall, be it if it's done via our NIDCO, which is one of these statutory agencies under us, or if it's been done in-house by our Highways Division or by the Pure Unit, the contract is monitored on a consistent basis in terms of an engineer who will be assigned to the project, and the engineer goes and he monitors according to the specification identified in the contract. So that is a normal process that we follow. I'm going to let Mr. Phillip respond to your specific question in terms of the roadway that you identified.
Mrs. Phillip answers, I want to bring another point to you, because clearly at a point it would seem as though something went wrong. Either material was short, but over the past 2 years, let us say 1 year, from 2016 to 2017, that situation remained the same. That's why I asked the first question, how often are projects monitored by the Ministry of Works and Transport?
Yes, member. That particular project, there's a response that it did, and we will.
Yes, member. The Toko Main Road, as well as, say, Blanchishes Road, Napmayaro Road, all these roadways are in serious disrepair over years. So what the ministry has done systematically, every year we try to do a portion of the road. So in the case of Toko Main Road, we started to work from Matlot coming out. We have reached the area that you spoke about, but funds, there isn't any live project going on. Funds has run out. We have it on the program. So if you notice, we came out of Matlot doing drains, retaining walls. We have some coastal problems that we now have contracts to do the coastal area, but it's a systematic way we're coming out of Matlot to reach Toko. So the area where you are concerned about, when the contract was over, what we did is some patching of that area. Because if you remember that road from Toko to Matlot, it was basically undrivable. Now most of that road is in good condition except in that area coming to Toko. We have that on our program, and as soon as funds is available, we will continue. Because if you notice, we also did some drainage there first. What we're doing is the drainage, retaining structures, then we come with the paving. So basically, it's only the road surface in that area is poor, and we're trying to maintain it through patching through the highways division. But most of these rural roads, because of most of them is over 20 to 30 kilometers long. It costs over $1 billion maybe to get them. So what we do systematically, every single year, we do a portion of the road in a systematic way coming out or going in. In the case of Toko Road, it's Matlot coming out.
Whilst you answered the question, I want to go back to when we were in 2017, end of 2016. I particularly followed that piece of work. And since then to now, which is an entire year, nothing has been done to that particular piece of road between San Souci, entering into Montevideo. Apparently, a contractor had a job to do there, and it was not completed. And it remains that way even after a year has elapsed. And now we have added situation in Grand Riviere, where after that serious storm had passed, there is a huge precipice into a river without any railings, and water from one side of the road going across the roadway. It's in a terrible condition, and I want to refer to the PS's announcement when you spoke about you all think carefully before you all assign resources. And whilst the population there may not be as large as another area, which is a built-up area, there is still the threat to loss of life or limb to a person passing on that road daily.
We could provide information for you on any contracts that was undertaken in that area. The period you're talking about, we had no contracts, no roadwork contracts in that area. Most of the times, you in a village, as we were speaking about, when you are affected, so people complain. So they see a contract is going on, the contract is completed because that part or that phase has been finished. So when they see adjacent to that, you have roads deplorable or what, they just assume that something went wrong, some contractor didn't do his work or some money, but it's not so. So any information that we could provide to show that there was no roadwork contract between 16, 17 in that area. We had a few drainage contracts a little higher, but we could give you a list of all the contracts that we had in that area.
Thank you. Since we're on the topic of drainage, I want to ask the Director of Drainage, Ms. Weber, in Senator De Freitas' conversation, he meandered around what were some of the possible causes in terms of the ramping up of the flooding. And it went from increased rainfall, drainage, funding, And I have a document here, which is, I assume, done by the Parliament, Head 43, Ministry of Works and Transport, under section Noteworthy Development Program Estimates for 2016 to 2018. And there are two items which stand out. And in terms of major river clearing programs and infrastructure rehab and flood mitigation, in 2016, for both items, there was $7 million allocated. And then in 2017, there was $2 million allocated. So I want to feel strongly that funding of these programs is the main culprit for what we saw in 2017. And as much as, there's always the view, we are blamed as Trinidadians of not being very clean. We dump things into the river causeways, into drains and so on. But like any other responsible parent, when we have children who are very mischievous, we have to repeat the same thing over and over every day for them. And I really feel that more attention has to be paid to the clearing and cleaning of these water courses. And I am also heartened to see that the 2018 estimates for both items, again, goes back up to $18 million. Now, I know allocations and getting money in your hand is two different stories. So I'm hoping we are 1 quarter way through the year. We have 3 months left of what we call the dry season. So I'm trusting that whatever allocation would have been provided for drainage, some attention is being paid to the water courses. And if some prioritization has to be made, I would like to see some prioritization be given to drainage, because this really throws a cost to the country, to the government, in terms of having to provide for people's fridges and stoves and mattresses. And we go through that $20–25 million expenditure at the end of the rainy season, whereas if we were to spend some of that up front, we can avoid that in its totality. So I'm hoping that is how your division inside the ministry day is thinking. And I'm hoping that you are getting the funding for it. If not, perhaps you'd like to share what is the status of the funding for that particular area in terms of flood mitigation, river clearing at this time, 3 months into 2018. If you can give us a little idea of what's been happening in that area.
The programs you talk about, those are programs under the IDF and Consolidated Fund. The program that was mentioned before, it's under a recurrent program. This is where we do all the silting works. And I take your point that once the funding is available, that we will be ready to start work as soon as possible, because the contractors we use for those projects are bonded through the CTB. And so it just means once the monies become available, we just have to, within up 3 or 4 days, can call a contractor out who is already bonded for a particular local area to start works on those water courses. What we have also done through our communication unit, we have sensitized them, and they have been sensitizing the public as to the ill effects of dumping their fridges and stoves and mattresses, as you mentioned, because it's a high cost to remove these items from our water courses. Yes.
In terms of the first 3 months of this year, I think we've gotten a pretty dry season so far. It hasn't been too bad. In your estimate, what quantity of work has been done in terms of the clearing of water courses and drainage? Because I mean, we're about 3 months away from June, and I would, I'd be very concerned if by now some action, some fair amount of work has not been taken in that regard, because it means I need to brace for another very, very active flood season in my area again. Can you speak to that?
Well, I must admit that we've had some releases, but we had bills from previous years which we would have attended to, because we had some works, the silting works that were done on some of the major water courses last year. So we did some paying off of those bills. But as I said again, once we get funding, we'll be ready to start the program up.
So the answer is not enough has been done for the first 3 months of this year?
Not with equipment works. I mentioned before that we did have works done in some of the districts with the river control workers that we have. So they are able to go into areas where equipment is not able to access.
Okay. Now, I want to ask, in terms of flooding, there are areas where, residential areas where people live are flooded, and especially those living in the floodplains. And then there are areas where communication is cut off, where the water crosses the road. And that in itself causes a challenge to get support in and out. Now, in some of these areas where the rivers meander, have the ministry considered the option of building banks and levees and so on? So at least the water doesn't cut off communication to some communities. And if it has to flood, it floods lower down somewhere else. But at least communication can be maintained in terms of the free flow of traffic, emergency vehicles, response vehicles. Any consideration in terms of the planning going forward? And I speak to that because just last week we did a disaster resilience program in Mayaro, and we did have engineering battalions from the Delaware National Guard, and Captain Wint spent 2 days with us from the ODPM. And we walked through some of the areas where floods, and you know, there was some suggestions that because of how those areas are designed, some work which may be substantially low cost in terms of, you know, levees and embankments can be used as some measures to keep the communications going, the road network going, you know, when the rainy season kicks in and the flood waters come up. So have there been any consideration for those type of solutions, not only in Mayaro, but in the other parts of south of Oropouche, you know, Moruga, those places? Any conversations along those lines so far?
Yes, we do forming of embankments, because once you distill the river, some of the stuff is used, or if we need to, we import fill to build embankments. So that is a consideration as well, so that when you raise the banks, at least the water, the carrying capacity is increased. Yes, we do.
I just want to ask Mr. Phillips, in terms of the landslip, and again, the landslip in Augustine is progressing well. I pass there every day, and every day the work seems to be ongoing. It's really moving fast, and we're grateful. The elderly citizens of Mayaro is very grateful that the bus can once again come to Mayaro. I have a question in terms of when a report of a landslip is made, whether it comes through the MP's office or whatever agents make the report, what is the average time frame before action is taken on remedying that particular situation?
Okay, well, most time an issue comes up with a landslip, it will go to the district, because the director of highways is the custodian for the road. Depends on his funds, depends on whether it's the size of the landslip, how critical it is. He may be able to respond immediately with in-house resources. But once there's a large landslip to like what we have in your area now, it would either go to we have a BLT section, we have the pure section. So something as critical as that, they'll normally send to pure. Why? Because we have in-house resources to do designs. Okay, and so it's a faster process there. But at the end of the day, it's still the funds, because it might not be on the program. All right, so what we do is that the critical ones on, say, Mayaro Road, Toko Road, Blanchishes Road, all the critical ones that we think will affect traffic will come maybe sent to pure. Once it comes to pure, you would need funds to do geotechnical and other surveys. That could take about a month. Designs, because we have the designs and capabilities and the drawings in-house, that could be done again within 3 weeks to a month once we get the soils report. And once we get funding, procurement, another month. Right? So basically within 3 months' time, you could have a landslip. In case of an emergency, we could actually, let us suppose it's an emergency where a road is cut off and we have to use some soils, and we could cut down the procurement process or something like that. What we do is like do soil tests, and we work, design-wise we work. So you could have a response a month. In the case of a real emergency, 3 months. But the bottom line is always funds.
Okay, so there is no fixed determination as to whether the landslip at point A will take a priority because it's new and we can handle it at least cost versus one that may be at third or fourth stage already, where we need a big budget. And I want to just draw the example of that same landslip in Augustine, where in 2015, when I became the MP, the drop in that road was about 24 inches. And in 2018, when the exercise started, the drop is about 10 feet. So I'm thinking if some action, 10 feet, yes, 10 feet down, the depression. If some action was taken in 2015, 2016, perhaps we may have been able to offer a lower cost solution than what we've been forced to deal with under some tough economic conditions. And I want to draw to you for another example. There is on the Tabaquite Road, there is a nice one where a portion of the road has already fallen apart. And I've written the local office and I've gotten a written response. But the response indicated that, you know, some shoring up will be done and the necessary notification and barricades have been put up. And again, I question the notification and barricades because it's 4 pieces of bamboo and some caution tape. If that particular landslip is left untouched for another 2 years, we may have to spend another $5 million to repair part of a main thoroughfare along that road. So I wanted to get a feel of, you know, what is the trigger for the ministry to act, knowing that, listen, I could deal with this now and save the state a whole lot of money 2 years down the road. So that is what I was trying to get at. You know, when would that particular landslip, which could be anywhere in the country, when would that be given? What conditions must exist for a landslip that is in its infant stage be dealt with before it matures into a massive crater and save some money?
I would start the answer and then I'll pass you on to the Director of Highways, because he is the custodian of the road. All right, so these things won't come to me. But as you said, what you find is some landslips are just washouts. And a simple curb wall, a simple sand-filled drain, a simple rubble drain could save you a road. Instead of spending millions, it could be a few hundred, a few $1,000s. Okay? So we try, if I am on a road doing any sort of rehabilitation, we do stuff like that. Building back the embankments because it's just a simple failure at the toe or something, all right? But when landslips do come to me is when it reaches stage you are speaking about, all right? So I'll let the Director of Highways take the question from there.
Basically, each landslip, a landslip is a project, right? Because you have, as Mr. Phillip had said, when a landslip is formed, we have to do, first of all, an investigation, and we have to go down on site and look at the landslip. Sometimes a section of the road is taken, sometimes the road is not affected. So we do what you call a prioritization. But our first response to all landslip will be to look at the landslip, put in some temporary measures to prevent further water from going into the slip while we develop what you call a temporary solution. So recently, for this year, we had a total of 15 landslips were formed, of which I think we had about 8 were critical where communities were cut off. So in those areas, we do what you call temporary shoring work, where we use steel piles and steel sheets, right? in an effort to keep the road passable for the motoring public. Now, this is temporary, because after that, we generally will commission geotechnical investigation. From the investigation, we determine the slip lane. And from that report, a solution is given, right? And once that is done again, we have to identify funds. Funding is the issue. Now, in the Ministry of Works, based on our last inventory that we did, there was 126 landslips that we have found where a section of the road was affected. We have what you call a BLT program, which is a Bridges and Landslip program. That program is geared specifically to deal with our landslips, right? Again, we have to prioritize the landslips, and we will put up that landslips under that program. Under that program, consultants will be hired, and we will procure contractors to do it. So in terms of the BLT program, if a landslip formed today and we prioritize it, you will get repairs next year on that landslip, right? In the case of the Mayaro landslip, what we did in that case is that it was critical. The buses couldn't pass, the trucks couldn't pass. Fortunately for us, we had the geotech report. And because it was so critical, we looked towards Pure. And Pure, with their engineering and design capability, they took over the landslip. And right now, the work has started. So landslip is a technical thing. Yeah? We're not in a position where we could just go in and build a wall. You must do the geotechnical information. What we do within the Ministry of Works is we go in and we do temporary works because we need to keep the road passable.
So there is no fixed trigger that will tell you that this will take priority, because in my mind, if I can deal with those infant slips, so for instance, this particular one at the 44-mile mark on the Tabaquite Road there, it's about 20% of the road that has gone down the side of the hill, and it's barricaded with some bamboo and some yellow caution tape. Now, in my mind, if some attention is being paid to that particular landslip soon, and if I heard you correct, you said that if something is given priority, the repairs may start 1 year after?
What I say, depending on the priority, like the Napmire Road one.
Right.
Right, Mr. Philip had said once he have the geotechnical report at hand, right, he had demonstrated that we could start that project within 3 months, which is what we did there from the time Mr. Philip got it.
Right. So I misheard that, and so it's not a year. So
no. What I was saying is under the BLT program, there are two approaches we take, right? Yeah. Under the BLT program, which is a program that was formed and approved by Cabinet to deal with the backlog of landslips. Yeah. Under that program, we prioritize the landslips. We procure consultants who will carry out the designs and tender documents, and then we procure contractors.
Again, I hear that, and I still feel that, you know, because this particular landslip, and I just use it as the example because that's the one I'm familiar with. I'm sure there are others scattered throughout other constituencies in similar condition. But why leave this 20% to go to 25%, 30%, 40%, and then within a year and a half time, we have half of the roadway going, and then it becomes urgent, and then, you know, when the buses can't pass, and then we have Beach and Navet and so on, these places, on the Tabaquite roadside, you know, inaccessible, then we go fighting to find, you know, millions of dollars to fix it. So I just trying to get in my mind why we will not have a program where these infant slips can be dealt with some urgency to prevent them from growing into a bigger issue while saving the taxpayers some money from having to issue $5 and $10 million contracts to fix a problem that we could have put some attention to while they were in the infant stage.
Member, if I just may, for a short, what you're speaking to really is project selection and prioritization. And what we have sought to do in the ministry, as the Director of Highways would have spoken to, is that we are trying to deal with them at a number of different levels. So we try to deal with them at the district level and in an immediate sense in terms of the in-house resources that we may have. So we try to address those as quickly as possible. We identified that there was a backlog, and we developed a program for that backlog. Now, because these are backlog landslips, how should I say it? The level of detail or the required studies that are required because of how far they may have gone, it will take a while. So it's a process that we go there. And then in terms of critical ones, where we may not immediately have, through the Director of Highways or the Highways Division, the resources, we utilize our pure division, which has more internal resources to address them. So we try to address them on all these different levels. You've identified whether or not we can develop a program for immediate, or should I say infant, this sounds like infant landslips, which we can take on board and seek to see how we may be able to do that. But it will all come back to the issue of project selection and prioritization, because as you indicated, member, while you would see those that are occurring in Mayaro, Member Jennings Smith will see them in another area, another would see them in another area, and they all come in. And then with the resources that we have, then we have to, a decision has to be made. And sometimes that is where you may find that something that in your mind's eye should be dealt with right now in order that we do not progress. But there's something else that has put a greater urgency on another area, which we must address. But we do take into account the suggestion you're making in terms of seeking to see if we can develop, because well, we can, and get the funding for a program that addresses those landslips in its infancy, let's put it like that, which really, that's what we seek to do at the district level with the resources.
Let me just ask one more question before I pass on to Member Jennings. In terms of these infant landslips, rather than leave them alone to grow, before the engineering of walls and piles and so on, long ago they used to plant some bamboo and use some very low-cost engineering solutions as very temporary fixes, and sometimes some of those fixes remain for years. I think in 2018, in the 21st century, even if we can't build the walls and put down the piles and those metal sheets and so on, leaving those landslips without some form of support to slow down the rate of deterioration, rather than just putting up the barricades for the warning, I think something needs to be done, even if you have to go back to the days of the bamboo and building the bamboo mattings and so on, just to slow down the progress. So after a year and a half, we would not have lost half of the roadway, and it saves some money, it prevents some inconvenience. But find some solution somewhere to deal with some of these infant landslips, the ones that are now starting to erode on the sides of the roads and so on. So I'll pass on to Member Jennings.
In October 2017, the Minister of Works, he said his ministry discovered that there were a lot of breaches on some of the major watercourses, especially the major rivers, which would have caused some of the significant flooding. You have identified that the Ministry of Works and Transport is partnering with the Water Resource Agency in the Adopt a River program to bring awareness to the various communities. Can you state the communities that have been targeted for this program? And I'll give you 3 questions to follow. When did the program commence? What is the status of the program? And how successful has this program been so far?
This program is in its infancy stage. There have been 2 meetings so far, and the idea is you get people or residents from particular areas to not do things that will hurt the environment. So that is what the program is about, so that people will be responsible for their communities. So it's very early, so it hasn't picked up yet, but that is the idea. The Ministry of Agriculture is also part of that committee moving forward.
Now, we know that when we have flooding and we visit the communities, they tell us what were the problems. They identify the rivers, the drains that were uncleaned, the areas that have been left unattended to. And 2017, we had a lot of those type of floodings where villagers from the east, from the south, Miaro, even in my own area, they came out and they said that they were not even visited or had a meeting. Now, this is since October of 2017 that the minister recognized that. And we are now in 2018. I think we had some flooding again early in January 2018 in Mafikin Village, right? And bearing in mind that we are in the dry season and we are just before another season to come for flooding, I believe that would have been put as high priority. And you need to tell this committee how many communities have been targeted and identify those communities that you have targeted, which you said are in the early stages.
All right, with respect to the areas that are prone to flooding, as we said, we have a program of over 200 water courses that we propose to do works on in the Mafikin area. In fact, all over Trinidad. Mafikin area is one of the areas targeted for attention.
I don't think, Mr. Chair, you're getting the question. I have asked you to tell this committee which committees you have targeted, which communities, because you said it is in the early stages, which communities you have targeted so far. What work have been done with those communities so far? Have you targeted 3 communities? Have you visited 3 communities, and which one?
Well, as I said previously, all the communities across Trinidad have been targeted for attention. And the programs that we would have put up came out of visits by our engineers from the different districts, as well as residents making complaints to our offices. So we have prioritized a number of projects for attention under our Stilton program, which has been approved by Cabinet, and we are waiting the confirmation of funds to do the project.
Quite clearly, Mr. Chair, I need you to give us some more specifics. We know that funding is an issue, and we know that meeting the communities doesn't carry a great amount of funding for a program where you want to meet with communities and have conversations with the communities, let them be involved. So that if you can't tell us this morning, the committee, we would like you to submit to us a list of communities that you have targeted so far. You said 200 communities you have listed, but then we know we have to have prioritization done. You need to tell us, if it is that you have actively been pursuing this, at this point in time, surely you should be able to tell us, yes, we have targeted and we have visited 2 communities, or even 3 communities, or maybe 1. So that is the kind of response this committee is looking for from you, because this is something that the minister highlighted about the Adopt the River program, and we are now in the month of March. So we are talking October to March, almost 5 months finished. So tell us, if it is in priority, what have you physically done? Apart from sending something to Cabinet, so are we waiting for that approval before we target any communities? Let us know. We need to know the process that you are adopting, because we know the rainy season will be upon us again, and the communities will be saying, yes, nobody came, nobody's talking to us. We need to know how far you are ready with this project.
Member, if I may. I think I have a relatively clear idea of what the member is seeking to get. What we've been speaking actually is on 2 levels. One, in terms of the communities and the rivers that we have identified for desilting, and 2, in terms of the communities that we've identified in specific to go into and have discussions. We have been doing that, not just in terms of drainage, but across the board in terms of our coastal works, in terms of our highways. So what we try to do at times is not just one issue, but we try to deal with more than 1 issue at a time. We will provide a listing and submit it to the committee. Yes, member?
Mr. Chair, through you, I ask a very simple question, a very simple question. I wanted to know where this project is at this point in time, because it is a project that the ministry put out there about the Adopt a River program, right, which would bring awareness to our communities. And I simply wanted to know what has been done so far. Have you all identified, it said 200 were identified? What has been done after 200 were identified on paper? So that is very simple to do. If you have the records in the Ministry of Works and Transport where you deal with these things on a daily basis, it is very simple. That could be done in 5 minutes. So tell me, after that was done in 5 minutes, maybe a day, what was the next move from then to now? Where are we now? Did we just do a document, a letter, or a correspondence, or some small study, identify 200 communities, prioritize the ones where we have most flooding, and send it to some other person or send it somewhere? We need to know where we are at now, at this point in time with that particular project. I am not looking for a generalized answer. I'm looking for a more specific answer, where we are now, so this committee could be able to determine what's going on with that particular project at this point in time, today.
Chair, through you, member, what I sought to clarify a little while ago is that the issue with the 200 areas is not the project that you are speaking about. 200 areas are the areas that we are doing desilting works on. You are speaking specific to another project. We will get the details of that and we will provide it to you, if it is possible.
Mr. Chair, yes, and I'm really being danced around here, because what I'm asking you, now I asked the question to Ms. Paula Weber, Director of Drainage Division. I asked her, relative to the Adopt the River program, state the communities targeted for this program. When did this program commence? What is the status of this program? And how successful it has been so far? The answer I got was 200. I didn't put that answer out. I am speaking from an answer. I found it to be a lot. What I'm speaking specific to is the Adopt a River program. What's the status of it today? How far have you been? How far have you reached with the Adopt a River program?
Madam PS, I know you said that you would submit a more detailed report, but there's no information available about it.
Chair and member, at no point in time do I want to lead this committee down a path that I'm not aware of. So therefore, that is why I'm asking you kindly to let us submit it in writing. If I were to seek to give you an answer now, I would be giving you an answer off the top of my head. You would not get the correct response. And I don't want that to happen for this committee.
I hear you. So could we have that in 2 weeks? All right, thank you. Is that all, member, for now?
Well, I think I have been answered, because I thought that at least a community would have been visited at this point. So I got my answer.
Anything further, ma'am? Yeah. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. I just want to go back to Mr. Gonzalez in terms of the issues we started to speak about last 2 weeks with developers. And my understanding of your responses was that from a legal perspective, the ministry itself lacks a bit of teeth to really create an impact in terms of how we deal with errant developers. And in your submission, just to bring back the information out, there were about 20 matters currently under investigation. As the Director of Legal Services, what plans do you have to address this sharpening of the teeth of sorts of your ministry in dealing with errant developers who are really, in some cases, prime culprits in the flooding that happens in the non-traditional floodplain areas? What action are you planning to take, and what can we look forward this year in terms of strengthening your ministry's power when coming to deal with that?
Yes, thank you, Member. Just to add some context into the discussion from last week, and to remind the committee and your viewing audience that unlike the Director of Highways, where persons who erect structures, illegal structures on our road reserve, the Director of Highways, or the Highways Authority rather, is given specific powers under the Highways Act to take certain administrative action against unlawful structures erected on our road reserves. The Office of Director of Drainage is not an office that is recognized in any legislation in Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, if you compare his powers to that of the Highways Authority, you will recognize that the Director of Drainage really doesn't have that legislative power to take action against developers who may have encroached upon river reserves or erect structures that can cause blockage to some of our major water courses. A couple years ago, before the Drainage Division was removed from the Ministry of Works and Transport as it was then, I started working with our senior officials within the Drainage Division with a view to developing a policy to be taken to Cabinet to give the Office of Director of Drainage certain legislative powers to take action against unlawful developers. Unfortunately, that work stopped when it was removed from the ministry. But what I did was that I handed all the research work and the draft policy that were done in preparation for legislation to the ministry that had responsibility for the Drainage Division. I wasn't advised as to whether or not they made any progress in taking the policy towards Cabinet for approval, as well as to Parliament to inform legislation. But when the Drainage Division was brought back into the ministry, I started doing further research into the project, and I am hoping that by mid-year, we'll be at a stage where we'll be ready to take the draft policy with draft legislation to Cabinet for approval. It will go through the LRC process and then onwards to Parliament. Again, the objective is to give the Office of Director of Drainage similar powers to that of the Highways Authority to treat with the issue of unlawful development on our river reserves.
Could you give us a sense of what are some of the actions, that you expect the Director of Drainage to take in that proposed legislation?
So when we look at similar legislation in other Commonwealth jurisdictions, most Commonwealth jurisdictions have a drainage authority as opposed to a Director of Drainage. It would fall to the Cabinet as to whether or not they wish to proceed in the establishment of a drainage authority, which is completely different from the present formulation. If we move into a drainage authority, obviously that authority would have the power to employ staff and to manage its own affairs similar to a statutory authority operating in Trinidad and Tobago. So what I plan to do is to put two options on the table, and the government will have to make a decision as to which one is more feasible in the circumstances. At the end of the day, some of the key features of the legislation would be to empower the authority or the Office of Director of Drainage to go into properties to serve notices upon developers, persons who illegally erect structures and blocking our main water courses, to give them statutory authority to have those developments or structures removed. And if they are not removed, they can take action against the developers. Also, you have emergency types of situations
where if action is not taken urgently, a community can be affected in a very serious way. In the jurisdictions that we are looking at, the drainage authority can go in, take whatever action that is necessary, serving the necessary notices, have the structures removed, engage in land acquisitions, and doing what is necessary in the circumstances to save a community from potential flooding disasters. Such powers may require certain constitutional majorities to be passed, but I think we are at a stage now where we all agree that if the issue of unlawful development on our river reserves are not dealt with, a lot of communities can be endangered. And I honestly don't foresee any problems where that is concerned in the event that the legislation may require a constitutional majority to be passed. But it does require the drainage, the Director of Drainage or a drainage authority to be granted certain powers to go in and take action to remove structures, even to go onto private lands, because that's another issue. A lot of main water courses pass through private lands. They're not state lands per se. And therefore, that is where you need to give the Office of Director of Drainage that legislative teeth to be able to make that intervention, even if the water course passes through private lands.
Thank you.
I know we're running perilously close to the end, but I want you to take one thing into consideration when in your planning stage. As you take legislation forward, there are the communities that end up being affected. And many times these communities are low-income communities and they do not have the wherewithal to take action on their own against a developer. And I had one particular case in Mayaro 2 years ago where work on a river course was being done on the top of St. Anne's Hill somewhere there. And the pond burst, and I mean, there were people saying that it was the rapture. You know, people started running, I mean, millions of gallons of water washed 30, 40 homes in a community. And these people lost everything. Now, thankfully, the developer did stand up and give some compensation. There were a few who were not compensated, and up to today, I think they still come to my office trying to find the developer to seek some assistance. So I'm hoping in some way in the legislation that the state be able not to compensate, but to act on the behalf of these communities that may suffer losses because of the action by a developer, so that they can get some justice at the end of the day. So in formulating your legislation, I'd really hope that be given some consideration at the end of the day as well.
Thanks for the recommendation. Appreciate it.
I would now invite the PS, to give some closing remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, we have found that the session has really been enlightening for us, and we hope we have responded to your queries in a positive and detailed fashion. Just to indicate that, Member Jennings, I've been advised that Adopt a River is a project under, I think it's Water Resources. I was wondering there for a while if there was a project in the ministry that I wasn't aware of. So I was deeply concerned there for a moment, but it is under Water Resources. Even so, the whole issue of ensuring that the communities are aware of what can be done in order to mitigate the issue of flooding is one that we do take on board, and we have been working with certain communities in that respect. I'm advised that we have been in Matlot, and we've been in Mayaro. Matlot late last year and Mayaro this year, but on a broader scale, looking not just at the issue of river control, but at a wider scale in terms of coastal erosion and in terms of overall community involvement, which we are seeking to do. I I took a note because of a particular area in terms of issues of causing flooding. We did spend some time on the issue of desilting of rivers, which we recognized even in terms of what we do on a normal basis, in terms of our river cleaning gang and our desilting program on a normal basis. After what happened last year, we sought to do a ramped-up program, which is what we are seeking to implement this year, funding permitting. We don't, however, want to leave this joint select and not identify that that is only one issue in terms of mitigation of flooding, because there are a number of other issues, and we take Member Parry's suggestion in terms of ensuring that we, not just in terms of landslips, but in all the other areas, that we seek to deal with issues at the infancy stage. And we feel in terms of drainage, if we do as suggested and what we've been trying to do, in terms of identifying to people what are the areas that they need to look at to mitigate drainage, that we are hoping will have some impact. We also take on board the issue of feedback, constant and continued feedback, and we, I heard a time frame given in terms of the MEN program. However, you would understand that when we get 1,000 excess calls, in terms of putting in the mechanisms for feedback may not take 2 weeks, but we will be addressing it, not just in terms of manpower, but in terms of the technology. So we have taken that on board. There's also the issue of project selection, and we do have a mechanism for project selection that stems from our planning ministry, come right down, right through the public service. And we follow that mechanism in terms of project selection and the identification of resources. But we are aware that the metrics that we use for project selection may not be exactly what is stated in theory or given in the documents. And it often has a lot to do with, once again, public perception and the input of the members of Parliament, which we seek to also identify within our overall process. At the end of the day, the Ministry of Works and Transport, we recognize the role that we play in terms of the economic development of Trinidad and Tobago. And the team that you see here, I must say, I can take this public opportunity to express my appreciation for the level of service that they provide on a daily basis. Where things can be done better, we will seek to put measures in place to the extent that we can to make them so. Thank you again, Chair.
I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for the cooperation and the collaboration. And I know we put you out of the way with the extensive list of questions. So I'm grateful for the responses provided by your staff. At this stage, our meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.